My name's Alex Williamson, executive producer of Earth at Night in Colour, and you're watching the Go Creative Show.
Hello and welcome to Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today's guest is Alex Williamson. He's the executive producer of Earth at Night in Colour on Apple TV+. Alex, welcome to the show.
It's brilliant to be here, and thank you for having me.
I am such a huge fan of this series. It's absolutely stunning because you're filming in pitch black, only lit by the moon. And it's just amazing that you were able to get these shots and be able to see it in color. This is truly a new way of looking at our planet. And I cannot wait to talk to you about it and learn more about how you actually did it. But before we get there, a couple things. Our sponsor for today's episode is MZ, Education for Creatives. There's never been a better time to learn and hone your craft than now, and never been a better place than MZ. Learn more at gocreativeshow.com/MZ. We'll talk a little bit more about them later in the show. Of course, follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. And you can do all of those things over at gocreativeshow.com, including learn more about our Patreon membership. So if you go to gocreativeshow.com/join, you're going to learn all about our new Patreon. And we're really excited about this. It's a great way to support the show and build a community around Go Creative Show. And of course, we've got some really cool extras for you guys by being patrons. You get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. You get exclusive voting rights on which episodes we're going to be featuring, or which guests we're going to be featuring, rather, which shows we're going to cover. You get to ask questions in your own voice, maybe even on your own video and face on our show with a co-host privilege. And then, of course, executive producer credits for those of you guys that are big supporters of the show. So there's so much there, and it's all at gocreativeshow.com/join. If you love the show, and I know you do, and you want to support us, that's a great place to go. gocreativeshow.com/join. So, Alex, I was able to see 5 of the 6 episodes. And I had to sort of like crash course them because, prepping for the interview, I wasn't able to see the entire episode of each, or the entire thing of each episode. So I skimmed a little bit here and there. But something that I love that you guys did is have a little behind the scenes at the end of each episode, which is like perfect for the Go Creative Show audience. So you guys out there watching the show, definitely stick through all the way to the end and then some, because the last 5 minutes or so is exactly what we love to talk about here at Go Creative Show. It's making of the episode. Brilliant idea, Alex, and I think you must be getting a lot of great feedback from those.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think audiences really respond well to the making of sections in any natural history series. And there's something, before I was making natural history programs myself, I used to love the bits at the end of the big kind of landmark shows where you see people heading off in their kind of to the ends of the earth and trying to film these weird and wonderful animals. And doing it at night, it feels like it's just kind of upped the bar a little bit more in terms of the tech and in terms of the endeavour. That kind of happened organically as we were making the series. And at the beginning, we never had, we were never planning on doing that. And as we started making these shows, a few of our producers said, hey, I reckon there's a good story in what we're having to do to get the images. So we kind of made that decision as we were kind of midway through production. So we kind of fell into those bits at the end. But they're some of my favourite bits, and they're kind of 3-4 minutes long. And also it kind of helps break the shows up, so you get to spend some time in the darkness with hopefully some really interesting animals, and then hang out with the crew for a bit, and back in for the next chapter. So they're fun.
The show is stunning. It really is. I mean, I like kind of these nature documentary shows regardless. I mean, people that listen to this show know that I cover it quite a bit. But Earth at Night in Colour is like something you've never seen before. I don't think it has been done before. Has anyone filmed with these super, super low light cameras at night?
So, I mean, for me, that was the reason for doing the series was it felt really new and it felt fresh. And there are so many natural history projects out there and so many natural history series out there. And they begin to morph into one another. We've all seen cheetahs running across the Serengeti. We've all seen white sharks breaching off, South Africa. And one of the things I really liked about the idea was it felt fresh and it felt different. And we wanted to kind of immerse the audience in a totally new experience of the night, I guess. And I think we're used to being immersed in the night and it being quite a sinister and quite a scary, foreboding place. And the ambition of the series was to try and immerse the audience into this world and make it feel magical, make it feel a place you want to stay and hang out rather than a place you want to escape from. And once we're in there, it was kind of meet some cool characters, nocturnal characters that you haven't met before, or meet some of the big box office guys you have met before, but in a totally different way. And up until now, I think filming at night's always been super problematic because it always has that quite techie, quite cold, quite scientific. You know what I mean? It looks It looks like kind of green, black and white, grainy look, or it's a thermal look, which I feel looks like a military missile locking onto a target. And it's hard to emote with a lion that looks like a kind of a missile target. So, and it's always felt quite, I guess, male skewing and Boise. And the ambition was to try and use night in colour, which had never been done before, and try and immerse the audience in the starscapes, the beautiful twinkling fireflies, and there are all these amazing colours of night, which just feel really magical and fresh. So no, it's a new technology. The ambition was large at the beginning, and then as we got into the production, we realised that the complexity and difficulty bar was probably even higher than we had anticipated when we first started it.
Well, how do you even pitch a show like this? I mean, did you just what was your first step? I'm sure at some point the idea came to you where, we really should do, a nature documentary at night. We can do it technically with cameras now. You can get super good imagery and ultra low light. But how do you pitch this idea? Because it seems like it's just riddled with complexity.
Right. Well, I think it was two things. Firstly, it was the newness, and more than half of all animals are nocturnal. So there were all these stories which felt like they hadn't been told before. And then we found this camera technology and we started doing some test shoots with it. And for me, we started looking at this imagery and the old adage is you never start your natural history show at night because people find it hard and it's hard to stick with. So I've always been very cautious of it. But then when we started looking at these test shots, it literally, I remember looking at these early test shots before we got the project commissioned and just feeling like, wow, it just feels so different and so new. Yeah. So we went in armed with some test footage and sort of said, look, this is the way that we could make the natural world look and feel. And we went in armed with a bunch of stories, and we went in armed with a lot of confidence, I think. And we got the show commissioned back in, I think it was May 2018. So quite a fast turnaround for natural history timelines. So we were looking at, I think it was 2 and a bit years. And sort of planet Earths and those big landmarks quite often are 4 years. And 2.5 years feels fast. But in natural history, you tend to have a season to get things. So you go to, I don't know, the Okavango Delta in October because that's when the rains are, and you have one little window to get it. So if in 2018 the hippos aren't doing what you want them to do, you can't just go back again in January. You've got to wait a whole another year. So and a lot of the shooting was done in one season. So we had one hit at it. So that was originally it was kind of there's all these stories we haven't told, and the technology felt like it was just at that point where we could tell them in a way that felt really, I guess, engaging. And it felt like, yes, this world you wanted to stick around in rather than feeling after kind of 10, 15 minutes, I'm feeling claustrophobic and it all feels black and white and I want to get back to daylight. So it was a mixture of those things, I think. And and then we got into it and then we just started shooting almost immediately. And we started making mistakes almost immediately, I think. We were learning as we were going through the project right from day one. Because it hadn't been tried before, so it felt like new ground.
And certainly, I want to talk about those mistakes, but just to bring people into the conversation a little bit here, for those of you that aren't familiar with the show, it's called Earth at Night in Color, and if you haven't gathered from the conversation yet, they're shooting at night. They are, it's moonlight only, right? Or did you bring any external sources at all?
So it's shot using moonlight, and that again was the. I think that was the single biggest challenge of the whole project. Was
Why?
Well, I think slightly naively when we went into it, we thought, well, the cameras operate in moonlight. Felt like a really interesting new look, and at one point we had toyed with the title "Life by Moonlight," and I love the idea of the silvery moonlight, and it felt 12 moonlit dramas was our concept. But what I hadn't counted on was the lunar cycle and the lunar phases, and from new moon to full moon. So the first mistake we made was we went down to the Pantanal down in South America to film jaguars. Never attempted at night before. And we got down there for a 5-week shoot, and the cameras were working pretty well. And then as the full moon began to disappear, we realised there's vast periods of the months where we couldn't get an exposure. So we're literally having to base our entire shooting schedule around the lunar cycle. So for maximum exposure, the cameras would work for 3 nights, probably either side of a full moon, when you have maximum luminance. And we could probably get an exposure 6 nights, maybe 8 nights either side. But then as you headed towards new moon, then there literally wasn't enough light in the night sky to get an exposure. So we had to, and again, normally in wildlife, you'd go out for 6 weeks and you'd sit on a leopard and follow her every day, normally every day, and you get that story. And for us, we were going out for these tiny little precious windows, and after sort of 6 or 7, 8 nights, returning back home to the UK with fragments of a story, and then you go out the next full moon. So we had these crazy full moon schedules where we might have 6 or 7 different shoots, one up in the North Pole, one down in Patagonia, one over in Africa, one in, Sulawesi. So they had these crazy peaks of activity, then these troughs of kind of recovery. So it was a very unusual working pattern, and I think for the whole crew and for the whole team, both in the office and also kind of on location, just to get used to it was a total rewiring of our general kind of mode.
Did you kind of like it in a way? Like, did it give you a different perspective on the project because now you had these pockets of time where you can maybe start editing or look through dailies in a way that you otherwise wouldn't be able to?
I would say no. If I'm honest,
I'm trying to put a silver lining on it, Alex.
If I'm honest, it was challenging and it was brutal. And so weirdly, you mentioned dailies again. That's just not a natural history thing. We tend to let a shoot go out, and at the end of 3-4 weeks, they come back and they might pop a couple of kind of key shots over to us, and we get excited in the office about it. But in this thing, we're right on the limits of technology the whole way, and we were demanding dailies or nightlies from the crews, which was deeply unpopular, I think. And I think you had people who were working incredibly hard out in the field, who were trying to get these shots, working right at the limits of the cameras. And then we were having to check back and analyze the histograms and look at the pixels to make sure that it was just the right side of what was okay. And that required a whole extra level of uploading and sending footage back to the Bristol office, which I think people, having worked through a night, often kind of trekking after pumas on foot for dozens of miles, I think was just an extra level of complexity. And we were talking the other day, and one of the producers was saying operating at night just increases the complexity across the board tenfold on everything. And whether it was finding the stories, and normally we would research diligently the stories before heading out, and we would spend 4 months, 5 months talking to scientists. There's a crocodile doing something over in the Australian swamps, and you'd learn exactly what the behavior is, what the best way of capturing it is, how you might go about it, when to go. And again and again and again, we were talking to the scientists, and they would say the same story, which is, we don't know, we haven't really studied them after dark. So we were literally having to guess quite often what's the best way of capturing the behavior, what's the best time of year to go. And it was a shot in the dark. And so that was tricky. Then simply finding the animals was, we often use those thermal military scopes just to find out which way to point the cameras ridiculously. The animals more skittish at night because they're not used to humans, and they were looking at you, kind of eyeing you up, thinking, what are you doing here? Are you a danger? Are you a threat? then obviously just the whole technical challenge was insane, basically. But when all the conditions and all the stars aligned, what it gave you was a totally fresh insight into this world at night, which no one has seen before, which felt really exciting.
It's exciting as a viewer, like you said. I mean, we're so familiar with seeing animals on film now. I mean, we've seen it quite a bit. There's so many shows that have done it well, and like the concept of filming at night is interesting to cinematographers for sure, interesting to filmmakers and people alike. But when you actually see it, you realize just how different and how fresh this is. And you also realize you're hearing stories that no one's ever, or you're seeing stories unfold that no one's ever seen before. Not just literally seeing the animals at night, but you're seeing them do things, behaviors that you would otherwise not be able to ever see. And I'm curious, did you, through this show, kind of change the history books, change the perceptions of certain animal behavior because you're now actually seeing it like no one's seen before?
Right. Yes, is the short answer. I think the most exciting, across the board, we captured quite a few firsts, and we documented things quite often that we weren't expecting to see or had no expectation to see. Peregrine falcons hunting at night was a massive first for the team. So peregrine falcons, the fastest predators on Earth, they nosedive out of the sky at 180 odd miles an hour. Daytime hunters.
Are these this is the one in Chicago, right?
Chicago, correct.
Yes.
Yeah. And they've been documented many times flying out of the sky during the day, hunting, and difficult to film. A bird, it's quite a small bird, flying at 180 odd miles an hour in daylight. And there was some evidence coming through that scientists had seen footage from nest box cameras of adults returning to their chicks at night with food. So there was speculation they might be hunting at night, and there was speculation they might be hunting using the city lights. But it had never been filmed before, never been seen before. So we went out, we were working with scientists. We went out, a team, I think it was May, to Chicago downtown area, and we set up on 2 different mating pairs, and one did nothing, just slept every night, and the other pair began to hunt. It was during the migration season. 250 different species flying through Chicago, wow. And this mated pair began hunting using the city lights, and what they were doing was they were using the tower blocks as cliffs, basically. So using them as man-made cliffs, and they were ambushing, so hovering above them, and then using the shadows to fly at full speed down these tower blocks. Wow. And they were incredibly successful. They took 8, 9, 10 birds a night. They started filming, and the team didn't tell me actually they'd filmed it. They'd said they'd seen it, and it was only when I first saw the first rough cut that I saw all these amazing predation moments. So that was a brilliant bit of revelation, and our team, in conjunction with the scientists, have written a paper on it, which is brand new behaviour, which is waiting to be published. So that felt really, really exciting. And across the board, cheetahs, another diurnal hunter. Most cats are nocturnal. Lions, leopards, jaguars all hunt at night, but cheetahs use their speed, and they do it in daylight. And weirdly, with them, we were following a lion pride. We were following the lions, and there was a very, very quiet full moon, and we were shooting the lions, and they weren't doing anything. And then one of the team, these 2 cheetah brothers seemed to be much more active than we thought. So the kind of cameras just turned around, followed these 2 cheetahs, and on the first night they had this insane night of they were trying to hunt everything they saw. They took something down. It then started a huge kerfuffle in the darkness. All the hyenas came in. There was this whole incredible unseen rivalry with hyenas, and we sat on them for kind of a couple of weeks, and this unbelievable kind of set of dramas played out. And these cheetahs, and you think of cheetahs as being big muscular cats, and they're kind of pretty timid and scaredy cats after dark, and they're brilliant hunters, but they just get bossed off everything. So it was so that felt completely brand new. And across the board, like everywhere we went, it was the same but slightly different. And I think same planet, different world was our kind of tagline for the series, and likened it to sort of Upside Down in Stranger Things. It looks the same, but it's just everything's slightly off. So that was everywhere we went, and some of it was quite nuanced. You know, the Jaguars were using at night. We're using riverways to stalk much more than they did in the day, and working with very experienced scientists and field guides out there, and they were absolutely gobsmacked. You know, they were saying they had no idea that the Jaguars would basically jump into the water and drift through the night on the rivers looking for food. So they were quite delicate and quite nuanced kind of differences, as well as the big kind of showstopper kind of behaviours. So it felt a really exciting project in terms of getting those new behaviours.
It's just so stunning to see. And I think one episode in particular that stuck out to me was you've mentioned it a little bit, but the Jaguar episode, at one moment in that, it's actually disconnected from the Jaguar story, but the click beetle larva lighting up in eating the termites. I'd love for you to explain that to people, because it's such a visually stunning moment in the episode, with all these like green lights just kind of emerging from this pile of dirt, or I don't know what it is.
Termite mounds.
It's absolutely incredible to see, and you just haven't seen anything like that before. And I think something that's really interesting in the season as a whole is that because you're shooting at night, when there are natural lights like I can't say it. The Northern Lights.
Aurora Borealis.
Aurora Borealis, yes. When you have these natural lights in the darkness, you really can experience them in a different way. And that episode, like I was talking about with the beetle larva, is one in particular. Can you talk to us a little bit about that particular scene?
Sure, yeah. And well, weirdly, I'm really pleased you mentioned that, because across the board, it's those magical... and I think when we were selecting our stories, we were looking at anywhere where there was bioluminescence or any kind of that magical glowing nighttime magic light. Basically, we really wanted to steer into it, because that felt like it was the magical feeling, that magical feel for the night. And when we went down to the first year, we went down to the slightly problematic first year when we went down to the Pantanal. One of the things which really just I couldn't believe was the jaguars padding around, and you'd see them padding through the darkness, and then you'd just see these little green flashes behind them, and it just felt like this crazy magic. It looked fake. It looked like it was VFX, and it obviously it wasn't. There are these green fireflies everywhere. So the click beetle larvae, basically, they set up in termite mounds, and they eat the termites, and they do it by creating these beautiful green lights that attract termites in, thinking that they are potential mates. So the termites fly in towards them, and it's this beautiful but deadly firework display, essentially. So they attract in the termites, and they're these very sinister, kind of looking, gross, disgusting little larvae which tuck themselves away in the holes in the termite mounds. And they glow, and they bring in the termites, and they gobble them up. So it's kind of sinister and deadly, but beautiful. And wherever possible, we in the jungles of Sulawesi, we film fireflies, and again we're drifting through the jungle in boats with these cameras, capturing the firefly displays. And what's beautiful about them is it looks chaotic, but then all the males will start flashing, and they synchronize their flashes. So each tree flashes in unison, so it's kind of a huge signal to try and attract in females from miles away. So it's a really bizarre kind of secret world of stories we haven't seen, and that was very much the ambition, was come and join us in the night and join us in the magic of it, rather than this kind of it always being a sinister kind of scary place, if that kind of makes sense.
Let's take a moment and talk about education for creatives. And there has never been a better time or a better place to get that education for creatives. And it's all there at MZED.com, MZED.com. Now, MZED On MZ, there are hundreds of hours of video-based, really high-quality filmmaking education. We're talking about education in topics like directing, cinematography, post-production, visual storytelling, and more. In fact, one of their newer courses is the Art and Technique of Film Editing with Tom Cross, ACE. He is an Oscar-winning film editor who actually edited La La Land. So when we're talking about like A-list educators, talking about all sorts of topics that you need to know. Now, this is the perfect time to hone your creative abilities and get better at your craft. And on MZ, it's the perfect place to do it. Now, let me talk about their educators. Vincent LaFerre, Shane Hurlbut, Philip Bloom. The ARRI Academy is on educators. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we talked about Tom Cross, of course, editor of La La Land. But there's so much more there. And yes, you can buy individual courses, and that's fine. But the best thing to do, honestly, is to become an MZ Pro member. Because when you have that subscription membership, you have access to their library of education. You can just blow through these as quickly or as slowly as you want, really dive into a whole bunch of different topics. Like if when you buy individual ones, it's the one that you're, of course, most interested in, and you're going to, you got to focus a lot of time on that and learn. But sometimes there may be things that you didn't even think you wanted to learn more about. But because you have that membership, you are exploring different areas that you may otherwise not have explored. So there's just so much benefit to becoming an MZ Pro member, and that's why I am, and I absolutely love what they have to offer. So it's all there at gocreativeshow.com/MZ, MZED, education for creatives. I want to talk about how you created the look and how you just accomplished the exposure and just the look of Earth at Night in color. Let's start with the camera package. What were you... Well, first of all, did you do camera tests when you were planning this series, or did you know right away the camera package you wanted to use?
Oh, we did so many camera tests at the start, and I think we had a good idea of the sort of cameras we wanted to use, and what was interesting was we actually used a variety of different cameras, so it wasn't like there was one camera we went with for the whole series, and certain things were better in certain environments. And we did this, I don't know, it was about a week-long ridiculous shootout in a field in Wales with a horse, I think it was, and this poor woman who had the horse, basically walked the horse around the field for us for a week, and there were a bank of different cameras lined up, and we shot it on every single camera in every kind of exposure with every type of lens, and we were just looking. Its marginal gains was what the whole project was about. Where can we get that half stop extra light? And it was a battle for photons is kind of where we ended up. So we did a huge amount of camera testing, then analysis, and we were really kind of methodical at the beginning of it, just to see how can we max the tech. But weirdly, the thing with this project was it was a project unlike any other I've worked on, where you start, you go, the problem is what camera do you use? And you kind of solve that, and then you go, actually, the problem is what glass do you put on the camera? And you find out the lens. Then the problem is actually you've got to film around what's the best full moon, how do you get the best stars, and you want to shoot away from the full moon because the full moon will blow all the stars out. So rather than backlighting a lot of your animals using sunlight, which you normally do in day, you want to front light them so you get the moonlight on their face and you get the dark sky with the stars behind them. Then the post process was the biggest kind of push forward in terms of technological advances. So right from the beginning, we were trying to figure out the best way to do it. And one of the cool things we did was we looked at astronomy technology as well. So we took astronomy lenses. So these lenses which are designed for looking at very distant, very tiny, faint, I guess, I don't know, I'm not an astronomer, nebula or supernovas in the distant galaxy. And we put them on our cameras and sort of pointed them back at our planet. And that's how we got a lot of our really, really beautiful longer lens. Any camera operator will know the longer the lens, the more glass you put on the front of your camera, the more light you lose. And natural history is all about getting that close up. So pretty quickly we figured out we could get kind of big T1.5 wide-angle lenses and get beautiful big landscapes with lots of light coming in. But the second you wanted to get close in on the action, you dropped, I don't know, three stops, 4 stops of light. So we were trying to figure out what's the best package of what's the best lens that gave us the best length in terms of shot size, but also letting enough light so we weren't kind of hemorrhaging f-stops, for want of a better kind of expression. So we used a lot of astronomy lenses for that. And then we also shot in full spectrum. So I don't know how tacky we're going to get, but basically, obviously, we normally shoot in white light. But we were shooting in the kind of the white light spectrum, and then also in naturally occurring infrared light. So we had all the white light plus a little bump up in terms of IR. So there's a lot of infrared, naturally occurring infrared light bouncing around the place. And so we shot into that just to give us that tiny little lift. So again, it might get you half a stop, maybe a stop more light. So we were using every bit of light available to us.
But I've got a question about those astronomy lenses.
Yeah.
I guess, what is the advantage of a lens kind of used in the astronomy space versus just like a super close up zoom lens? Like, is it made specifically to be faster so you can get more light in it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's designed for capturing these. And we were basically thinking, how do normally we use a CN20, like we normally use a big fat 1,000 mil lens, but by that point you're losing so much light. So we were thinking, where can you find lenses which are designed for shooting things that are very distant but also very faint? And that's where one of our lead camera tech advisor, he is also a passionate astronomer, and over a pint in a pub when we were allowed to do that, he said, "I've got a great idea. Why don't we look at these astronomy lenses?" And then we embarked on this kind of down this route of adapting these crazy big kind of 20 kilo lenses, which are pretty good. If you're on a Jeep and you can mount it to a Jeep, but when you're hacking through a jungle in Sulawesi, and one of the making of sections is him reaping the rewards of his idea, hacking a kind of carrying a massive lens through the Sulawesi jungle, probably regretting it. But
exactly, I was just thinking, kind of you probably said, "Why did I suggest this?"
Yeah, whose idea was this? So that was why we turned there. And as the production moved forward, we actually began to find other more normal lenses which kind of offered that advantage. That was the kind of, it was just looking at trying to think laterally of everything that are taking tech from wherever it was kind of appropriate.
So after all that extensive camera testing with the horse in the middle of the night and the whole thing, what camera packages did you end up deciding on?
So we used a lot of different systems for different environments. The Canon ME20 was probably our workhorse. That's the one we used the vast majority of sequences, and that is it's an HD camera, but we worked out a way of up-resing it to 4K and across all our different tests. I think also it was looking at what noise pattern they made as well, and we felt like that particular camera, the noise pattern, and we were dealing with noise throughout the whole series, but it felt quite cinematic. It had a kind of cinematic filmic noise quality to it, if that makes sense, rather than some of the other cameras felt a bit more video-y in terms of the noise, had more tricky noise patterns to cancel out. So yeah, that was probably our main camera. And then in terms of the lenses,
the ME20. I'm putting a link to all these things in the show notes, guys, so you can check them out as you're listening. But sorry, forgive me. So the Canon ME20. What other packages were you using? And
in terms of lens, one lens we used was called an Astro lens. Astro lens. It's just an enormous lens designed for astronomy, and we adapted that specially so that it would fit on the front of our cameras. And again, it was just fighting for every little photon of light. And then across the board, we had different rigs and different systems that fitted each environment. And one of the nice things about the show, I think, is we got really into the story design as well. So we start every episode in the daylight, and so the idea is we can meet our characters in day in the normal kind of familiar way, and then we hit sunset and the lights dim down, and it's like switching the stage lights off, and then we fade back up into this different kind of look, which is the moonlit look rather than the sunlit look, obviously. And so we start in daylight, and for that we could use all our normal natural history kind of toys, I guess, and use gimbals to get that nice, beautiful, slow, drifty look. And then we would head into night. And what was interesting was so many of those kind of tricks and toys that we rely on shooting wildlife were stripped away from us.
Yeah.
We referred earlier to lack of long lens. The closest we could get was probably 600 mil. So you don't get that 1,000 mil close up, the beautiful intimacy of a lion's eye or the twitch of a tail. So you're slightly more mid-shotty. The moving a camera, all those kind of gimbals and shot overs and GSS stabilization systems, they hadn't been set up for any of the night camera tech. So we couldn't get them re-rigged and recalibrated, at least not for the vast majority of our shooting windows. So kind of a few of those really basic kind of cinematic looks that we often rely on to shoot natural history, we had to scratch our heads and figure out how to do it. And yeah, the nighttime look, we kind of fade up into night. And
well, first of all, just to round out what you were saying before, I think even without all of those tricks that you normally have at your disposal, I don't think it really mattered, Alex, honestly, because like when people want to see these environments, like those close-ups are absolutely stunning. Obviously you want to see close-ups when you're seeing nature stuff like this, but because it's such a different world and you're seeing this at night, you really want to absorb the environment, I think. Like that is what made it, I think that's what made it different in and of itself, is the way you shot it. And yeah, I mean, you shot it a certain way because you had certain limitations, but I think it worked for the show, 100%. I think it helped the show.
Thank you. Well, and it's interesting because we had the discussion: do we want it to feel more doxy than cinematic at one point? And so much of natural history is kind of covering it at every angle, and so many of these stories you get one shot of it, and sometimes it isn't perfectly framed, but it feels more like you're in the moment. So that was definitely part of a look we were going for. And I think some episodes as well have, there's variety as well. The Cheetah episode for me feels it's dark and ominous, and it's these two brothers trying to survive. Cities feels more like a kind of Batman movie. Lions is a kind of heartfelt story, and they're dramas. That's what we were going for. It's not a conventional wildlife series where you go, here's a 3-minute story, here's a 3-minute story, here's a 4-minute story. Forget that. Here's a 3, and quite a lot of wildlife is, amazing stories with a link. On the other side of the planet, this is happening. And very early on in the development of the series, and partly perhaps because we were trying to figure out, how much are we going to get a really rich series, or is this going to be a complete nightmare? So we thought, let's lean really into character. So they're little character filmettes, little storyettes. So 22 minutes. And so, yeah, we meet our lioness, and she's got her 3 cubs, and we see her in the daylight. We can look into her eye, we can fall in love with her, and then we switch the lights out, sunset. We light back up again, and we see her in this new moonlit domain. And now she's got different challenges, and we already know her story. We know what her arc's going to roughly be. And then, that's the story of a mum losing her cubs in the night. And we follow, and they're family stories. So it's not all predation and killing. It's about what's that emotion. It's a mum losing her cubs. It's a little tarsier family pinging through the forest, and little ones learning how to hunt. It's a jaguar love story, falling in love under the kind of firefly, starry sky. So they feel kind of they're warm fairy tale kind of stories. It was the concept behind them.
I want to talk about the lighting and the look, particularly the way you achieved color and worked with color in Earth at Night in Color. First, I know that this is lit by moonlight, but was there any manipulation at all of light? Were you bouncing? Were you using negative fill? Were you doing diffusions? Anything to manipulate that light?
So I'd say, the ambition was the ambition was moonlight. And for the vast majority, and at the beginning, we went out there and we did try at the beginning using crazy kind of lighting rigs. We had helium balloons. We were bouncing lights off them, and every animal for probably 50 square miles just took one look at it and said, "I'm not going anywhere near that." And it would pool. What we've discovered, obviously, is you get that pooling. So you get that kind of the camera's exposed on the foreground, and then you get that black drop off. So it starts to feel like I've seen this before. And again, the first time we went down to the Pantanal filming jaguars, we had a boat with the camera on it, and we had another boat with a big lighting mask, and we thought, can we bounce a bit of, I guess, kind of ambient light in there? And yes, jaguar takes one look at it and thinks, well, I'll just slink 10 meters away from the river and lie in peace away from these clumsy humans. And again, we got that pooling effect. And I think that was part of the journey we went on, was to think, actually, no, you know, if we do this properly, and if we do this kind of more purely, what's it going to look like? And then we went out and we did this test shoot in Zambia with hippos, and it was all around the full moon, and we were getting our act together. And with the exposures we were coming back with, you see the hippo in the foreground, you can see 3-4 miles in the distance, and the stars behind, and you get this kind of, it's the idea of depth and looking deeper into the night became this really big thing for us. And it's, can we look further into the darkness than ever before? And when you don't light it, you get this incredible kind of new way of seeing. I think that's what people have responded to, or seem to have responded to. So moonlight for all the big kind of, I'd say for the vast majority. And then there were some environments, like maybe in the jungle, or particularly dark ones where we've bounced a little bit of, I guess, fill light in. But what again has been beautiful is that the cameras are so sensitive, you can bounce a little bit in and it doesn't disturb the animals. And I think before, using more cameras from even 4 or 5 years ago, or technology from a few years ago, you'd have to up the amount of light that the animals are suddenly kind of they're not being natural. And I think what was good about this was, you can tell the big wide scenes are unlit, and they're natural. And any other film crew that wants to follow a lion pride and wants to try and light it, be my guest, because it's difficult. It is a pure look.
So earlier in the show, you were telling us that you were shooting in white light, but you were also incorporating some infrared into that. Talk to me about, first of all, what does that even mean? Incorporate infrared light into the imagery, and how does that change the look of the shot? Sure.
So we were shooting using white light, as you normally do, but because we're battling for every photon of light and trying to get absolute maximum exposure, we're also shooting into the infrared part of the spectrum, the invisible part, which our eye can't see. And this isn't us using an infrared light, which you might have seen before, has that kind of green look. There's naturally occurring infrared light in the atmosphere. So we're shooting all the white light and then stealing a bit of infrared as well. And we're just getting that extra kind of maybe one stop of light it would give us. And so the reward is an extra stop. So we get a slightly better exposure. And the downside is that it skews the entire image pink. So a lot of the rushes came back looking kind of reddy, pinky, and they had this slightly unsettling kind of, God, is this going to look a bit weird, this whole series?
Yeah.
And so what we would do is we'd get that image, and then we would essentially strip the pink hue off it. So we would dial the pink back. And beneath the kind of that pink veneer were all these beautiful, naturally occurring nocturnal colours. So there were the blues, there were the oranges, weirdly green was the one colour which really got hammered by, I guess that makes sense, it being red. But beneath that kind of red top layer were all these beautiful, naturally occurring colours. So we got the advantage of having a little bit more exposure, and very easily, just in the grey, we could whip that kind of pink hue off and reveal all these naturally occurring colours, which was the kind of the way that we rebalanced the shot. And then, one of the biggest challenges was, and when we started showing the first versions of these shows to our commissioning team, was, well, it looks like daylight, and they were kind of, there was so much variation. I think, the night in Australia kind of seemed to look different from the night in Africa, which seemed to look different from the night in Patagonia, and I don't know we're still figuring out why that was. And we were moving at such speed, but for example, we did one shoot in Kenya, and we were trying to work out why the exposure wasn't so great, and we realised actually it was burning season, so there were a lot of fields being burnt. So there were all these soot particulates in the air, which just were dropping our exposure level just a fraction. So yes, one of the problems was it could, when you really dial everything up to the max, it could look like daytime, and then it feels like you're watching a daytime show, but not a particularly attractive one. So we had to find that right balance where we were being, I guess, kind of true to the colours of night, but also trying to emerge. And we went through a lot of different attempts, and some were very dark and sinister, and then some were way too, there's the information in there to really dial it up and make it look almost like daytime. So we kind of settled on a look which we felt was pretty balanced, which was kind of right in the middle, and it felt like it is the night in colour, and it is kind of the closest thing I think we felt that our eyes were seeing in the field. And yeah, it felt like it felt like the right look for us, but it took many months of tinkering to kind of get it there, and we figured that out in the Lions episode, and then once we had that look, we could kind of roll it out for the whole series.
You must have been struggling with grain and focus. I mean, I just, how are you getting clean, crisp focus when you're opened all the way? You're shooting at crazy ISOs.
Yes.
I mean, those two things must have been extremely challenging.
Yes, and I think we're lucky that we work with the best camera operators in the world at this. We were talking about the Peregrine Falcon, and there are a couple of camera operators who specialize in shooting birds, and we were lucky enough that they were on our team, and they are the best people on the planet at following a fast moving bird and keeping it in focus. So we're working with the best operators, brilliantly talented, and yeah, I mean, great question, because I have no idea how a lot of them do it, and a lot of time they're waiting night after night after night. In Finland, one team waited for 11 nights in a small wooden hide for these bears to emerge from their hibernation. And every night we were thinking, it must be tonight, and they're radioing, and no, it didn't come out. So huge amounts of patience, and then they're such a talented bunch, and they can keep it in focus when the action happens. And the noise as well was the other huge and really interesting challenge. We worked with a company in Bristol. We got some footage and we sent it out to various companies and said, here's a scene. It's a scene actually. It's hyenas hunting elephants, which has never been filmed before, and that's going to be on the second run. But we're always.
Oh, you're doing another 6?
There's another 6.
Oh, so, that's great.
Yeah,
Teeny World did the same thing. We covered that show where they released the first 6 and then they're doing the second 6. That's cool.
Yeah. So I mean I can do a bit about the overview of the series is it's 6 episodes set at night, and we run through these different worlds, and there's another 6 episodes due to be aired, I believe, in spring next year. So it's 2 runs of 6. I think it's a really smart way of doing it, because I worry about viewer fatigue otherwise, and I think how do you get the audience to go from episode 11 to episode 12? You run the risk of feeling like it's beginning to become familiar. So it feels. I think having 2 runs feels really smart, and the second run has got some really cool shows in it. So and it takes you to different parts of the world, which is great. I've forgotten what you asked me. Sorry, I've got sidetracked.
Oh, the noise.
Oh yeah, so the noise. So we took this scene and we sent it out to various people, and there was one company just did a brilliant job with the noise. And weirdly, we were thinking, wow, they've nailed this. And it was borderline. We're always running on this tightrope of what's usable, what's not usable, and we had this incredible behaviour. And yes, it's a pack of hyenas, a clan of hyenas hunting an elephant calf, and the elephant's mum is trying to protect it. It's absolutely heart and mouth stuff. But it was kind of a little bit borderline, and so we were thinking we really wanted to obviously see whether it was usable. And this one outfit came back they'd written new algorithms to deal with the noise, a company called Moonlight in Bristol. We didn't know where they were in the world, actually. I thought, they'll probably be in LA or they'll be in California. And they're in Bristol. It's like, well, that's where we are. Then we were like, well, whereabouts in
meant to
Bristol?
be.
And we were in our editing facility's house, and we looked at it and looked at their address and just, hang on a second, this is weird. And it turned out they were in the room one floor above us in our edit suite. So we put out this kind of tender to the planet, and the guys upstairs had done it. So it became quite helpful because we could back and forth, ping pong out footage. So they were brilliant, and they wrote new algorithms for dealing with noise, and they were bespoke. On each show we would look at the worst offenders and go, right, this is a cool shot, but what can you do? And it would just be multiple. V equals Q, someone once told me, versions equals quality. And it would just be kind of, we'd ship it out. It would become a bit smudgy. They would sharpen it up a bit. And it was just that painstaking process of how do you get the best quality underneath all the sea of noise. And yeah, without them, I think the project, they were instrumental in the final kind of look of the project. So it felt like it was a series of bringing different people, the crew with their brilliant talents and patience, this team of people in Bristol, and it was about just pooling the best people together to try and create this new look. And the ambition of the series was to immerse the audience in the night like never before, and to meet new characters in a fresh way. And I hope that's kind of what the series does in these different magical worlds, starlit magical worlds. And what I hope comes across is the authenticity of what it looks, has a fresh look, but also it has a kind of a fairly pure, it's a natural, pure kind of moonlit look to it, which hopefully shines through.
I want to take a minute and talk about the voiceover for Earth at Night in color, because that's such an important part of any of these types of storytelling. That voice is what you hear the whole time, and you need to they need to resonate with you. You need to trust them. You need to love them. They need to be good at it. So it's a big decision. Talk to us about that process and who you ultimately chose and why.
Exactly. I think it's telling your story is one of the big things, is who's telling the story. And I think you can have a great project and a great series and pick the wrong voice, and it can really impact your experience as a viewer. And when we were doing this project at night, we were thinking, is it a male voice? Is it a female voice? Do we go sinister and foreboding? And I think for a long time we were thinking, let's take a slightly kind of sinister twist to it. And weirdly, during the kind of editing process, a lot of the guide voices, the more sinister guide voices, along with the dark material, it started to feel just sinister overload. It felt like it was too much. So the obvious kind of direction to go down felt kind of actually the wrong one. And we started thinking, actually, maybe it needs to be more family friendly. It needs to be a warmer voice, fireside kind of storyteller. Come with me and immerse yourself in these worlds. And we started to literally take voices off the internet and just lay them in under our actors' voices, kind of authors' voices, lay them under our footage, and we would just listen one after another. And it was really interesting hearing the different tonality that these different voices, and often they'd be talking about, about a watch commercial or whatever it is, but you get the tone of it. And then we happened upon Tom Hiddleston, who one of our producers said, he's got a great voice. And we took one of his early recordings of an audiobook and we popped it onto the footage, and it was immediate and unanimous. I think the whole team were like, wow, he's got a great voice. Wow. So then, we obviously had to work hard to kind of persuade him to do it. And what he brought, and he agreed, which was brilliant. And then what he brought, I felt he had this warmth to his voice, and he's great at character. He's done everything from Marvel to theatre, so he could really get into the characters and develop the characters. And you kind of feel you're with him with the characters, and he brings them to life. So we were very fortunate that he did it with us, and we spent a lot of lockdown actually in various countries. I was in lockdown over Zoom, kind of directing him, which was he's a very nice chap to spend a lot of time locked into a Zoom room directing. So yeah, he was a really good sport, and I think his voice is. We listened to it and just thought he takes it to another level. So we were delighted.
It is the perfect choice. And you mentioned lockdown. I just have to, in our last minute or so, how did the lockdowns impact production?
So we were unbelievably fortunate on this one, and we had three. I think we did 80 shoots, 85 shoots in a calendar year, 12 months. So we just had constant shoots out, and we had 3 shoots left. We had one up in the Canadian Arctic, one in Patagonia, and one in Norway. And lockdown hit with 2 days left on all of them, and we flew everyone back home 2 days early. I think we literally got the last plane out of Chile, and got everyone back into the UK. Everyone dumped their kit in the office, locked the office up, and that was us locked down for 2 months in the UK. But incredibly, we had literally shot the last frames, and then we were in the editing process, and we were able to keep that working, remote working. We were able to mix it remotely. We were able to, we set up grading facilities. So we ended up keeping it moving forwards, sort of scraping forwards in this kind of lockdown. And had it been 2 months earlier, it would have been, it would have completely destroyed the schedule. But we obviously it impacted it, and we went longer than we intended. But we were able to kind of keep it ticking forwards. Did you have to do any reshoots? No. So you were done. Even with the 2 days left, you still had everything you needed. Everything we needed. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. And again, like natural history is hard just to go and reshoot it, because normally you have to wait a year. You know, the snow's melted, or the conditions have changed, or the lion prides disappeared into the long grass and you can't follow them. So, and this project, because it was at night, so much of it was, everything we filmed felt fresh because it's at night. So we could bend the stories towards what we were getting, probably with more flexibility than had it been a daytime show, if that makes sense. So yeah, we were very fortunate with the timing of the lockdown in the UK. But obviously since then, all productions and all schedules are just kind of up in the air, as we know. Well, for your sake, I hope your next project's a little bit easier, or at least takes place during the day. One of the promises I made myself was I'm never pitching a show at night again. As much as I love it, and as much as I love the end product, and and it was when we finally saw that end product when it went live, and the whole way through it, we were kind of asking, what's it going to look like? And it doesn't matter how confident you are. There was that little, which I think is good in a creative thing, having a little edge of uncertainty. And when we went to Apple's opening day, Spielberg said, if it's easy, it's not worth doing. And that stuck with me throughout the whole thing. And then we saw it, and it looked great. And I thought, I thank goodness. But yeah, daytime all the way for me from now on. Amazing. Well, the show is just fantastic. It's called Earth at Night in Color. It's on Apple TV+. The first 6 of 12 episodes out now. And it sounds like in the spring, the next 6 are coming out. So you've got something to look forward to there. Alex Williamson, thank you so much. The show is just phenomenal, and I'm so happy that you came on to talk about it. Thank you very much for having me. All right, I want to thank Alex Williamson for coming on the Go Creative Show and talking to us all about this new project, Earth at Night. It really is stunning. And if you guys haven't seen it, I can't suggest it more, especially since at the end of each episode, you get that little bit of behind the scenes, which is just perfect for us here at Go Creative Show. So I know you guys are going to love that. And plus, it's just interesting to see. When do you ever get to see the Earth at night like that? In true color. It really is stunning, and you guys should check it out. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know what you think of our interview in the comment section of whatever platform you're looking at this on, and we'll address it there. Thank you for your support. I also want to thank our producer, Connor Crosby. You can find him at ignitionvisuals.com. Matt Russell and his team over at gamestructure.com, who mix and master and make the show sound so good. So thank you, Matt and team. And of course, thank all of you for listening and supporting. Don't forget, go to our website, gocreativeshow.com, and follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And of course, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app and join our new Patreon. There's a lot of fun stuff there. And I just cannot wait to really build that and get some of that interaction between you guys. And really appreciate the support you've been giving us thus far. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And with that, we'll see you next week on another episode of Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers.